Think about a action that you've taken that you feel was free. Something that you would say, I exercised my free will there, and for which you would, if somebody asked you, accept responsibility for better or for worse for what you did. For example, all of you are UCF students, so at some point you were facing a important decision about your life, and the decision was, should I accept this offer from UCF or not? For some of you, it may have been a really easy decision. For others, it may have been a longer, more drawn out process where you had to weigh a lot of different positives and negatives, the other offers you'd gotten, the scholarship money, the possibility of taking time off to do a gap year or to work for a little while or whatever. And at the end of the day, though, it was you and only you who made the decision to accept the offer, and who clicked the button or called up the admissions officer and announced your intention to accept the offer, or however it went. Think about how that decision and then the action that you took felt from the inside. It probably felt to you as though there were really two possible futures before you, or perhaps many possible futures before you, but not just one. There was first, there was a future where you accept the offer to go to UCF and attend. There might have been a second possible future where you decline the offer and worked for a little while. Maybe a third possible future in which you declined the offer and accepted an offer from another university. Maybe a fourth and fifth possible future. And it probably felt to you, because this was something you felt was free, as though, yes, there were many factors that went into your decision making, but nothing except your will, nothing except your decision ultimately determined which of those futures became a reality. You and only you picked the future of accepting UCF's offer and going to UCF. That's at least probably something like how it felt from the inside. You had complete control over this decision. You could very easily have, had you so decided, chosen one of the other possible futures, declined the offer and done something else. Contrast the what seems to be paradigm case of a free action here with some examples of very clear-cut cases of unfreedom, where everybody, whatever your feelings on the general topic of free will happen to be, everyone should agree that people in these circumstances are not free. Obviously, somebody in jail, somebody literally locked behind bars. Paradigm case of somebody who's unfree. Somebody who is held at gunpoint, someone who is being physically coerced. They maybe are at a red light and somebody gets in their passenger seat, pulls out a gun and tells them that they're going to take the car and they need to get out or they'll be shot. When that person gets out, there was a decision of some kind that was made there, but we wouldn't really describe that as a paradigmatically free decision. I mean, they could, I suppose, have said, no, screw you, and face the result of being killed. But there was no realistic possibility in which they lived and also kept the car. I mean, supposing that they don't know some kind of jujitsu or don't have their own weapon or whatever. Here's another case of psychological compulsion. And this is not unlike these first two where there's like physical bars preventing a person from leaving a cell or the threat of violence or death at gunpoint. In this case, we can think of psychological compulsion. This could be a compulsive shoplifter, for example. This could be a case of severe drug addiction. This could be a case of something a little bit less stigmatized, perhaps, something like OCD, compulsive hand washing, let's say. In each of these cases, the kind of compulsion it comes from the inside here. There's not a physical person or set of bars outside of the person restraining their will. Instead, it's almost a sense in which like the will itself is constrained. Somebody might not want to be a shoplifter, but finding themselves at the same time wanting to steal. And if that desire to steal is so overwhelming that they can't resist it, then really there's only one thing they can do if the compulsion is strong enough, which is reach out and steal. The most perhaps clear cut and also kind of sci fi case of unfreedom would be a pre programming case. So imagine that you discover that there's a microchip in your brain and that's been there since birth, and the microchip is hooked up to some wireless device that is controlling the decision making processes in your brain, and then also issuing in like physical bodily actions as a result of the decisions that are being implanted by the microchip. On the other end of the microchip is a mad scientist who is typing in his keyboard things like, decide to open video on free will on YouTube now, go. And then all of a sudden you find yourself with this desire, I think I'm going to go watch that video that I need to get out of the way for my philosophy class. And then you do it, right? If you discovered that that was what was going on in your brain, clearly that would be a deeply disturbing discovery, because it would show none of the decisions I made were truly mine. They came from the outside, and I really have no control over the mad scientist or what he does. And so as a result, I have no control over the decisions I made. And for that reason, I'm not free. I want you to think a little bit about comparing and contrasting these. What do the unfree cases have in common that the free case lacks, and vice versa? What is it about this decision that makes it free? And what is it about these that make them unfree? There is, of course, no complete consensus among philosophers on anything, but on the question of, one, whether there are actual cases of free will, and two, if there are, what exactly the cases of free will have in common that cases of unfreedom lack. That said, though, there's a sort of widespread agreement among philosophers that there's a baseline necessary condition. I say widespread, it's not completely universal. People have challenged this principle, but it is quite popular. There's a basic necessary condition that we have to meet if we're ever to be free. And any free decision, like your decision to go to UCF, had better meet this condition if it's truly free. So this would be not a full-fledged account of what free will consists in, but rather a requirement. This requirement says you're not free unless you fill in the blank. So this is what we can call the ability to do otherwise condition. The ability to do otherwise condition says this: a person X does an action A freely at a time T only if that signals that what comes after here is a requirement for what comes before. This is a requirement for freedom. Only if X could have done otherwise than A. What this tells us is that freedom, if it exists, requires the ability to do something different. To the extent that you think of your action or your decision to go to UCF as a free one, the ability to do otherwise condition is telling you that the essence of part of what makes that action a free one is that although you decided to go to UCF and went, you could have done something else. You could have decided to go to USF, or you could have decided to take a gap year. By contrast, to the extent that we think obviously a person in a prison cell is not free, to that extent, we think the reason that they're not free is because they don't satisfy the ability to do otherwise condition. There's only one thing that a person in a prison cell can do, and that is remain in the prison cell. I mean, they can try to break out, but it's not going to be successful. And actually, to the extent that we think, well, maybe it is a possibility for them to break out, well, then maybe they are free to leave. If they really are not free to leave, then it's because they can only do one thing, which is remain in the cell. Likewise, if you're being physically coerced, there's a real sense in which the only thing you can do is hand over the car to the person with the gun. I mean, lest you choose the possibility of risking the end of your life. And then finally, if we think of the case of the mad scientist manipulating you through a device in your brain, there it seems as though there's really only one decision you could make given the causal influence that the mad scientist is exerting on your brain. And that decision is, say, open up the YouTube video. There's nothing else you could have done, even though it felt to you from the inside as though there were many things you could have done. As a matter of fact, it was the scientist implanting that decision in you. So Van Inwagen gives us a really nice picture. This doesn't originate with him, but it's useful. A nice picture of both the sort of feeling of freedom, and then also this pictorially captures this ability to do otherwise condition. What would the world need to be like in order for us to be genuinely free and meet this condition? The thought is that the world, this is our sort of timeline, would have to unfold a particular way, maybe in a kind of deterministic way. But when it comes to our free decisions, here's you choosing between two possible futures. There's a kind of branch that occurs in the timeline at the moment of choice. This could be a future where you go to UCF or a future where you don't. It could be a future where you get an A in the class, and a future where you don't, a future where you study, a future where you don't, and so on. Future 1 and future 2. This is what we'll call the Garden of Forking Paths vision of free will. And the experience of freedom is the experience of having before you a garden of forking paths. It's as if you're wandering through a garden, you come to a split, and you think, I could either take this path or I could take that path. And the only thing that determines which way I go, even if there may be many influences, is my choice and my choice alone. That's what things would need to be like. That's what I would need to be like, and that's what the world would need to be like if I were to be genuinely free, or if you were to be genuinely free, or indeed if there were to be free will at all. So this, both the ability to do otherwise condition and then the picture of it in the Garden of Forking Paths, sets us up nicely to articulate the main philosophical problem of freedom. The next video is on determinism. And once we have determinism in hand, we will then be ready to formulate the central problem, the central philosophical problem of free will.